I call the Honourable Shane Jones.
Just before I continue, I'll take a point of order.
Point of order, Honourable Shane Jones.
I am quite serious that Speaker's ruling 121, which is often shoved at not members of the vintage of my honourable colleague on the other side of the House there, but at younger, newer members, you cannot, Madam Speaker, if I could seek some clarification, you cannot bring into the third reading stage references to what did not happen. You cannot bring into the third reading stage references to international drug testing data which did not actually feature as a part of the SOP that he's referring to.
You are, I have to commend the member, you are correct in outlining that. However, the member has concluded his debate, and I would encourage the member, if he's wanting to take a call on this third reading, that we do so.
Madam Speaker.
I call the Honourable Shane Jones.
Thank you for those words of clarification. It's a great way to learn. I want to acknowledge the chair of the committee, and having provided that latitude, I shall now exercise that entitlement. So, what I think it's very important, Madam Chair, when we look at this bill, which will pass, and I acknowledge the chair of the Select Committee saying, despite his misgivings, they will vote for it. But given the latitude that you visited upon him, this bill is in response to an original set of provisions which reflected unrealistic red tape. It also reflected a very complicated and bureaucratic approach to deal with an issue that requires, Madam Speaker, that requires not only focus but fewer cobwebs as possible. Now, what does this bill actually do now that it's been improved through the committee stages? It provides a regime for the testing of people who may or may not be impaired. Now, a critical point that possibly divides this side of the House with our friends in opposition, Madam Speaker, is the morality associated with compulsion. Now, although, Madam Speaker, I never sat through any of the Select Committee proceedings, I do acknowledge, having had some experience in the fishing industry, that rooting out the usage of mind-altering drugs, etc., is something of great concern to any industry. But such are the drugs, Madam Speaker, that are available and are used, unfortunately, it is well beyond the ability of a lot of drug testing to actually detect what is flowing through the system. And therein lies an inordinately big difficulty. But you have to measure the handicaps of our drug testing regime against the ability of an employee to assert their entitlements, which they do have the ability to draw down on by dint of the law. Now, you've got one side of the House who actually believes that employees have significant and honourable entitlements. You've got another side of the House, as reflected in the divide in this debate, who believe that they don't. Now, and I think that's an incredibly important principle. And as Madam Speaker, you've indicated, if you look at those Speaker's rulings, principles are important in the development of the speeches in the peroration period of these bills. Now, what else does this bill actually do? This bill provides for a regulatory framework enabling subnational level of government, otherwise known as a regional council, to generate regulations to either assist or oblige, once they're enforced, craft to keep clear of when a rocket goes into outer space. Now, I'll resist the opportunity to talk about the opposition being either lost in space, because that will cause you to caution me and to go back and study the Speaker's ruling. So I'll avoid that. I'll avoid that temptation. But the point that needs to be made is that we need to be passing provisions and regulations that do not thwart the ability of firms, the ability of employees, and the ability of businesses to go about their lawful duties. Now, the reason, and I agree with the Minister promoting or shepherding the bill through the House, that we cannot have a situation that we have in another maritime sector, i.e. the fishing industry, where inordinate levels of bureaucracy are visited upon them, which is why my colleague has stood back and said, let's have another look at that. And I think that was a problem with the original version prior to the refinement process during the committee stages of this bill. Do not overload, do not threaten, and do not squeeze out the initiative of businesses by an unnecessarily heavy and burdensome level of regulation, which is why, as Minister Whaitiri pointed out, for smaller operators, we need a fit-for-purpose regulation. I want to go on and talk for a moment about, Madam Speaker, what's an incredibly important point for New Zealand is our ability to access international funds or a fund to cope with the sad but woeful experience we had here in New Zealand when the vessel ran ashore, as she said, near Motiti Island. That shocked New Zealanders, but I think what shocked us more was the inability to completely hold, other than through a long, protracted litigation process, inability to hold the shadowy forces behind these international shipping interests. We got the chap who was nominally in charge of the vessel, and he served time, but it took a great deal of effort, and indeed some people are to this day, Madam Speaker, deeply disappointed that the full cost was not borne by the shadowy interests behind a number of these international shipping lines, and not only are there lawyers, but the manner in which they structure their affairs in international jurisdictions makes it extremely difficult. So this bill is an improvement in that sense. It enables our regulators, it enables our government to actually join others in litigation, and a fund will exist. But if I can just come back to the main point of whether or not we are creating a system that is safe for the men and women, and I would say that I know a wee bit about it, having a family member who is a young bosun on an oil boat. So this is often a regular feature of discussion, shall I say, amongst that generation. I must confess that, well, one shouldn't bring family members up in the house, etc., but he's 6'5", 115 kgs, better looking than his father, if I can put it to you like that. Now, a major challenge in a vessel of that nature, obviously, is safety and processes that ensure that no one is bucking the system and endangering the lives of their fellow crew members. And I think the National Party member, I'm still learning his name, but came from a naval background, made a fair point. And obviously he's got the bragging rights because he was a captain of a vessel. But I do think that at all times he wasn't a captain of the vessel. Okay, he's a backbencher today then, sorry about that. But the point I would make is that on this side of the House and in New Zealand First, naturally we're voting for this bill, but we never lose sight, and a third reading opportunity is a great place to say it, never lose sight of the balancing act between coming up with a regulation that will outlive us as politicians. We'll have come and gone, coming up with a regulation that can be imposed or can be invoked to go ahead and exercise an entitlement in law, to go ahead with a test, but never ever in this House should we agree to testing regimes that become so burdensome we actually end up thwarting the initiative of many directors, many business owners, and indeed directors or operators of these vessels. And it's been a matter of considerable disappointment to me, Madam Speaker, that a lot of the rhetoric that has come from our friends on the other side of the House, at one sort of superficial level, it's been pro-enterprise. But when you look at how burdensome their regulation has actually turned out to be in practice, they've said one thing, but it's led to another. And I think that's a salutary reminder for those of us parliamentarians, when we pass legislation that then leads to delegated legislation in the form of regulation, that we don't, as we leave this place, leave a legacy where businesses are drowning in very seriously burdensome levels of regulation. And I can't help but conclude the other side of the House, despite having talked a big game, in many cases have not left a legacy of fit-for-purpose regulation. Now, through the committee stages, with the introduction of an SOP, there's a sharper clarity around the importance of testing, but there is an acceptance that employees have rights in law, and those rights should not be just smudged out in order to suit ideological proclivities, which from time to time are on full display on the other side of the House. So naturally, I join with Jonathan Young, and I acknowledge the work that the officials have done. I acknowledge the work that he and his committee members put up with in order to bring the bill here. But I close this speech with a warning. Do not introduce regulatory regimes that have the perverse effect of making it harder for businesses to flourish and maintain jobs. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
I call Alistair Scott.